Firstly, Kvei Rabbanim. Mendel Whiteman is here, the Moyes Safra Center. Rabbi Benjamin Goldschmidt was here from Park East, Rabbi Chaim Steinmetz, my dear parents, partners, friends, family. Firstly, I want to start off with the L'chaim. Thank Hashem, Faro Shechiyanu, Vikimanu, Vigiyanu, Lizman Hazeh. I want to express a tremendous thank you to our Rebbe, as Yankee said, who was our role model. And learning was his essence. He would bring for hours and swim through the whole ocean of not only Talmud, of the entire Torah. My dear parents, who are such role models for myself and my whole family, the personal example, and to instill a love of learning. The Friday night tables went on for hours, and the whole discussion, there was no discussion of politics, the whole discussion was about the Torah and about the Parsha. The Torah came alive, and that left an indelible impression on all of us. My older brothers, who are Hasidim, my oldest brother, Rabbi Krasnianski from Melbourne, Australia, is soon to finish the Shas for the 5th time. And when I finished the actual Talmud Thursday night, who walks into the room exactly at that moment? My wife walked in. It was very appropriate. My better half. It's only because she runs the Chabad house and the family so well that I was able to find the time to study the Talmud. So thank you, Tanya. My dear children, the tremendous nachas. How many people live to hear their own eulogy? This is the fuel that keeps us going, and it's very appropriate we're making the Siyum in this room, because we're celebrating now the 13th year, the bar mitzvah of our kollel, the Upper East Side kollel. And we have the rabbi of the kollel here, Rabbi Daniel Shachar, who actually finished Shas before he got married. And we're very proud to say that over 30 of the rabbis who studied here went on to go and build Chabad houses and community centers, servicing thousands and thousands of Jews. And it's the kollel, the steady learning, 6 days a week, that actually inspired me, and that's where I did a lot of the learning. So here we are. So we're going to finish the entire Shas. So let's get a little taste of learning. You handed out the Talmud. Let's all look in together the last words of the Talmud. And when you study it and you think about it, there are many questions that just jump at you. And you realize that you have to really learn it and understand what the Talmud is saying. So the very last word of the entire Talmud is Tana Devei Eliyahu. This is a Tana, it's a Braisa from Devei Eliyahu, which was taught by Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet. As the Gemara says in Ksubas, Kuvav, that Elijah the prophet appeared to Rav Anan, the Amoira, Rav Anan, he would teach him to learn Tana Devei Eliyahu, Rabba and Zuta. So this is a Braisa from Eliyahu, Anavi, Tana Devei Eliyahu. And he learned, Kol Hashoyna Halacha. So whoever learns Halacha is B'chol Yom, every day, Muftach Lo Yishu B'nei Olam Haba, he's guaranteed that he's a citizen of the world to come. And what's the proof? Shenemar, it says in the verse, it says in Habakkuk, Halichas Olam Loi, the simple reading of the verses, the entire verses, it says, Hashem measured the earth, he saw and he spread out the nations, he dispersed the nations, and he destroyed, he crushed the great mountains that were from the beginning of time. He humbled, laid low the small hills, and Halichas Olam Loi, the ways of the world belong to him. Hashem runs the world. That's the simple meaning, the reading. So the rabbis say, don't read Halichas Olam Loi ela halachas. That whoever studies halachas, Olam Loi, the world to come, belongs to him. It's interesting. He uses the word hashoina. He doesn't say haloimid, whoever learns. The first group of Hasidim, they all were rebels. They all did not grow up Hasidim. This was the first generation of Hasidim. So the prize students of other yeshivot ran away and became Hasidim. And the one of these prime students of the greatest yeshivot in Eastern Europe, and his previous student came back from Mizrich. He says, I don't understand. Why did you leave the yeshiva? Why did you go to Mizrich? In my yeshiva, we went through the whole Shas. So the former student smiled, the Chassid, and he says, you know the difference? In your yeshiva, I learned how to go through the entire Shas. But in Mizrich, I learned how the Shas should go through me. Hashoina comes from the word shinui, it changes you. Studying Torah has to change you and inspire you. And it says, Olam loy, is the numerical value of 36, because they say there are 36 tractates in the Talmud, even though, if you count, there are actually 37. Maimonides says there's 35, because he counts Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, Baba Basra as really one Masechta. But how would he get 36? So some say Makkas and Sanhedrin are one, but either way. Okay, so Rashi says, halachos. What do you mean halachos? Halachos refers to the Mishnah, the Braisa, and halacha l'Moshe Messinai, because he just finished discussing that the Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah learns all the laws of a Nida and a Zava. He learns that halacha l'Moshe Messinai means things that were received from Moshe at Sinai. It's not mentioned anywhere in the Torah, but when Moshe stood in the mountain, he received all these laws. Hashem gave him the mitzvah and also the explanation of the mitzvah, and these were recorded in the Mishnah. So those are the last words. Okay, it seems very clear-cut, very simple, very straightforward. But if you start thinking about it, it's actually very, very puzzling. Question number one. This Braisa is actually brought in Megillah, in Tractate Megillah. There he says, whoever studies halachas, he doesn't say every day, he just says in general, whoever studies halachas is guaranteed to be ben olam haba. Tractate Megillah, Chav Ches Amud Beis. So why over here he says whoever studies halachas every day? Studies halachas every day. And also, why 2 halachas? You have to study 2 halachas every day. Why isn't it enough to study 1 halach? If 1 is no good, you need 2. Why stop at 2? You do 100 blessings a day. Maybe you should study 100 halachas a day. Why? 3 is better than 2. Why halacha is only 2? Also, we know at the end of Tractate Sanhedrin, it says, Kol Yisrael yesh lem chelik le'olam haba. Every single Jew has a portion in the world to come. Not only those who study halachas. Here we say only those who study halachas is ben olam haba. And what's really puzzling, Tosfos asked the question, he says this is the only tractate in the Talmud where the ending has no connection to the tractate, has no connection to what's being discussed earlier. Every single ending, all the other 36 tractates, the theme, the ending has a connection. Even Banoyach, as the Mashal, it has a connection to those Masechtas. This is the only Masechta that has no connection. What does this halacha have to do with the price of tea in China? What does it have to do with what we were discussing earlier? So Tosfos says that because he just mentioned halacha that these laws are received from Moshe at Sinai, so he wants to finish with laws. And then he says that we find in the tractate in Berachos, Lamed Aleph, the Gemara says that when you say goodbye to your friend, don't say goodbye only by mentioning halacha. You should study halacha together before you leave. Before you say goodbye, you should study halacha together. Al yipater ela mitoch dvar halacha. Why? Because halacha gives a person joy. And we find that the ending of every prophet, the prophet always tries to end on a joyful note. So when you're about to say goodbye, you feel sad, you're saying goodbye, you're departing from your friend, from your loved one. So you should part on a note of joy, on a high note. So we see over there that the Talmud says that halacha is associated with joy. So he wants to finish with a joyful thought, just like you finish the Tanakh, all the Nevi'im with a joyful thought, and the end of the whole Tanakh, Divrei Yamim, also ends with a joyful thought. So you want to finish with something positive and joyful, which is halachas. But it's very puzzling. Why halachas? Why does the Talmud say that when you say goodbye to your friend, the last thing you should talk about is halacha? Any words of Torah give you joy. Because the Hashem Yesharim is Samchei. Why only halacha? But the ultimate question, the klotz kasha, the most obvious question is, we're finishing the Gemara, 37 tractates. How many pages? It's a big commitment. You would think that the Talmud would conclude on a high note discussing the value of studying Talmud, of studying Gemara. What does the Talmud end? The value of studying Mishnah. Kol Hashem halacha is studying Mishnah, B'naisa, halacha l'meisha b'sinai, Gemal Yeshigim. You're talking about Gemara. Why don't you talk about the advantage of Gemara? This is not the ending of the Mishnayos. The Mishnayos doesn't end till Uktzin. This is the end of the Gemara. He finishes with a B'naisa, Tanya. Not even the statement of an Amoira. And what's the B'naisa? The whole B'naisa is talking about the Maila, the advantage of Mishnah and B'naisa and halacha. We're 2 weeks away from the Alter Rebbe's yahrzeit. The Alter Rebbe was Shnei Or, 2 lights. The Alter Rebbe was the author of the Tanya and the author of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch was revolutionary, just like his Tanya was revolutionary. No one ever wrote a Shulchan Aruch like it. The Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe, unlike the Mechaber and unlike the Tur and the Rambam, the Alter Rebbe wrote a Shulchan Aruch with the reasons, every halacha with the reasons behind the halacha. So the Alter Rebbe has an unbelievable take on this whole Tana D'Ve'Eliyahu. And with his explanation of his Tana D'Ve'Eliyahu, they're able to understand everything, it all makes sense. Because as Mendel mentioned earlier, part of the trivia, that the oral tradition was handed down in 40 generations. Just like Moshe received the Torah in 40 days, so too the whole oral tradition was handed down in 40 generations from Moshe to Rav Ashi, the end of the Talmud. And that's why the Mem, Mi Moshe ad Moshe lekam ke Moshe. The Mem of Moshe gave us the written Torah, the Rambam incorporated the whole oral Torah, the 40 generations. So when he's making a siyum, when Rav Ashi is making a siyum here, he's not just making a siyum on the tractate of Nida. He's making a siyum on the whole Torah Sheba'al Peh. He's making a siyum on the whole Gemara, which is the end and the final transmission of the whole entire Torah Sheba'al Peh that's binding for all future generations and every single Jew. So the Alter Rebbe discusses the Tana D'Ve'Eliyahu that's actually in Megillah. It's the 4th part of the Tanya. You can listen to it on tanyaclass.com, thanks to Chen and to all our wonderful sponsors. And I want to give a special thank you to all our partners who are here tonight. Without them, none of this would have been possible. We're sitting in the Chabad house, only incredible partners. Hashem should bless them because they are full and equal partners and they have a share in everything that's happening here. So, the Megillah, in Tractate Megillah, Gemara says, Rish Lakish says, when Hillel says in Ethics of Our Fathers, that whoever utilizes the service of the crown of Torah deserves to die. So he says, what do you mean the crown of Torah? It refers to those who study the halacha, those who study the Mishnah. Because those who study the Mishnah, the halacha, that's the crown of Torah. So whoever uses, for his own personal usage, utilizes the service of a Torah scholar who studies the Mishnah, deserves to die. The question is, why only someone who studies Mishnah, someone who studies the halacha? Why is that called the crown of Torah? And then the Gemara quotes there this Tana D'Ve'Eliyahu, that whoever studies halachas every day is guaranteed that he's a citizen of the world to come. Why only halachas? Whoever studies any part of Torah, why only halachas? And then he quotes the Gemara of Menachos, Tzadik Tes, on the base, the Gemara says, Rav Ami says, that the obligation to study Torah day and night is, how do you fulfill this obligation? If you study Perek Aleph Shacharis or Perek Aleph Hashoina, if you learn Mishnah, You fulfill the obligation only by studying Mishnah and in a broader sense studying Halacha. That's the only way you fulfill your obligation of studying Torah day and night. Now the Rebbe asks, why only Halacha? Any part of Torah is good. All of Torah is good. Why special? What's so special about Halacha? And that's called the crown of the Torah. So the Rebbe explains, and he quotes the Arizal. The Arizal says that every Jew has to come into this world, and we come many times into this world, we are reincarnated, until we fulfill all 613 mitzvot. Every one of us has to fulfill all 613 mitzvot, in action, in speech, in thought. We have to study it, we have to learn it, and we have to do it. And that's why we have to come down many times in order to be able to do this. Why? The Arizal says why? Because in order to receive Olam Haba refers to the afterlife. In order to receive Olam Haba, the afterlife, in order to bask and to experience the pleasure of godliness, you must fulfill the 613 mitzvot, and you have to study the 613 mitzvot. Why? Because otherwise, it would be impossible for us to receive this godly light. Because God is infinite. We can't even look at the sun without being blinded. Imagine looking at Hashem, seeing Hashem, experiencing Hashem. It would completely obliterate us. So we need a garment to protect us. Just like Moshe, when he went to the mountain, he went in a cloud. The cloud was like the garment that protected him, that he shouldn't be obliterated by this intense revelation of godliness. So in order to be able to experience Olam Haba, you must study the whole entire Torah, all 613 mitzvot, and in thought, speech, and action. These are the garments that actually protect you. Why specifically the halacha, the mitzvah, the halacha? Because what is the essence of Torah? Eliyahu HaNavi was really the expert, because Eliyahu HaNavi went to heaven alive. He never died. So he is in Olam Haba. So he's coming back and telling us what's going on in Olam Haba. If you want to, in the afterlife, you want to experience Olam Haba, this is what you have to do. You must study halachas. Why? Because the whole essence of the Torah, the whole essence is, the Torah is there to explain the mitzvah. The mitzvah is the will of Hashem. The will of Hashem, that is the essence of Hashem. Just like within a person. You want to know what a person really is? It's the things that you care about. It's the things that you really want. That's who you are. The understanding and the logic and the comprehension, that's a part of you. That's an ability that we have to understand. It's almost like a rationalization that comes after the fact. You want to explain why I want this, so I'll give you the reasoning, I'll give you the explanations. And we see that in the Torah. Right in the beginning, in Genesis. Hashem says he wants to wipe out the world. Why? What's the reason Hashem gives, the Torah gives? Because man is born with a Yetzer Hara, and therefore we must wipe him out. Okay? Go one Torah portion, skip forward. After the flood, Hashem says, I better make an oath, I better make a covenant that I'm not going to wipe out the world. Why? Because because man is bad news, and I better swear that I'm never gonna destroy the world. So wait a minute. The same reason is given for two opposite things. Here, the same reason is given for Hashem to destroy the world. A minute later, that same reason is given why he's not going to destroy the world. Because the explanation is almost a rationalization that comes later. The essence is what you want, what you deeply want. So what is the essence of Torah? The essence of Torah is Hashem's will. This is what Hashem wants. You know, the Rebbe, before he became Rebbe, he was very close to someone. They used to exchange letters. And after the Rebbe became Rebbe, those letters stopped. Instead, the Rebbe would send him the letters that he would send to everyone. Before a holiday, the Rebbe would send a letter to the entire Jewish people. And the person was very offended. He thought he had a special relationship with the Rebbe, and now all of a sudden he's getting generic letters that everyone in the world is getting. So he wrote to the Rebbe, he was like very offended. So the Rebbe says, I thought you're interested in the things that I'm interested in. You want to know what I care about, what I'm interested in. That's what I send you. This is what I am. This is who I am. This is what I'm all about. You want to have personal letters? Okay, I'll send you a personal letter. You want to know Hashem. You want to get to know Hashem. Hashem says, this is who I am. The 613 mitzvahs. This is what I want. This is me. You want to get to know me. You want to touch the divine. This is me, the 613 mitzvahs. There's nothing else. This is who I am. The rationalizations, the explanations, that's all an explanation for the Torah. And that's why, what's the ultimate mitzvah of all the mitzvah? It's the chukim. The chukim, the mitzvah that have no rational explanation. That's the purest expression of Hashem's will. And that's what the halacha is. The halacha is, just like the chukim are the purest expression of Hashem's will, within Torah itself, it's the halacha, it's the Mishnah, it's the Braisa, it's halacha l'Moshe Messina, which is the purest expression of what Hashem wants. Hashem says, this is me, this is who I am. So you want to touch the divine? You want to get to know Hashem? You want to connect with Hashem? It's only by studying all 613 mitzvahs. And by studying the mitzvahs. And that's the essence of the oral Torah. And this is what generates the Olam Haba. This is what generates this intense revelation that the soul will experience after 120 years. Because the oral Torah reveals the will of Hashem. The Torah is a closed book. The Torah tells us Hashem wants 613 things, but I have no clue what it entails. Put on tefillin. You read the Torah, the 5 books of Moshe. How do you put on tefillin? You put it on your arm, you put it on your nose. I have no idea. Keep Shabbos. One verse in the Torah becomes a whole tractate. It's only the oral Torah that reveals the will of Hashem, spells it out and defines it in all its details. So when the Jew studies the oral Torah, he studies the Mishnah, he studies the Halacha, by revealing the will of Hashem, this is what generates the reward of Olam Haba. This is what brings the revelation of godliness. But it's also what gives you the garments and the shields that enables you to receive this revelation without being obliterated. Why? Why does the halacha have this ability? How does it protect you? Protect the soul? Because what is the definition of a mitzvah? The definition of a mitzvah is Hashem commands us. By definition, it means that we are separate from Hashem. If we're not separate from Hashem, there's no meaning of a commandment. I command you to obey and to do what I want. So the whole essence of the halacha is that there is an entity, so to speak, outside of Hashem, and Hashem is commanding us and wishes us and wants us to do the mitzvah, to do the halacha. So the whole purpose of the halacha is to guarantee our existence, that we should not be obliterated in the light of Hashem. We should retain our existence, and we should be able to receive and to absorb the light of Hashem, this infinite revelation of Hashem. And that explains why the importance of studying the halach. He says called hashoyne halach. Shoyne comes from the word sharp. The Torah says you have to learn Torah v'shinantam levanecha. Torah has to be sharp. It's not enough just to learn the halacha. You have to understand the halacha. You have to understand the reasoning behind it. It has to fully engage your mind. Because what happens when you study halacha, when you study and understand something? When you study and understand something, and you understand it very well, it reveals, you experience great pleasure. When you have an insight, it gives you tremendous pleasure. When you fully understand something very well, you experience pleasure. You're able to access and experience something that's beyond the intellect. And this is the experience of Olam Haba. Olam Haba is the world where the souls understand and grasp godliness. When they're able to experience this revelation of godliness. Because by studying the halacha and revealing the halacha, revealing the will of Hashem, you're also, and by studying it well, you're also revealing the pleasure of Hashem. You're revealing the revelation of godliness. And you're able to absorb it, receive it, enjoy it. And therefore now, there are practical implications to this whole approach. Because the question is, if a Jew only has a limited amount of time, I can't study the whole Torah. I don't have the time. I don't have the ability. Where do I have to start? Where do I start? What should be the focus? What's the most important part of studying Torah? So in the laws of studying of Torah, in Yeridea, in Reish Mem Vav, all the Paiskim, the Drisha and the Shach and the Taz, and the Alter Rebbe, and the Mishnah Brura in Kuf Nun Hey, or Chaim Kuf Nun Hey says that if a person only has a limited of time, the first thing you have to study is Halach. You have to study Halach. Especially the halacha that's relevant to your daily life. When the Rambam wrote the Rambam, he's giving us the most important halachic ruling. What is that Rambam's halachic ruling? That you must learn the Rambam. Every Jew has to learn all 613 mitzvot. The Rambam didn't just write a book. That is his verdict. When the Shulchan Aruch, when the Tur wrote the Tur, and the Shulchan Aruch wrote the Shulchan Aruch, that is the most important sak halacha that a Jew, this is what a Jew has to learn. A Jew has to learn Tur, a Jew has to learn Shulchan Aruch. When the Alter Rebbe wrote his Shulchan Aruch, this most important halachic verdict is that this is the program of learning that a Jew must learn. A Jew has to learn the Shulchan Aruch and learn it with all the reasons. And this is also what learning Gemara is all about. The focus of learning Gemara also changes. As the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son, in the introduction to Shulchan Aruch, writes about the learning, the way his father taught him how to learn. That even the Gemara, the focus has to be the halacha. You have to learn the Tosfos, the Piskei Tosfos, you have to learn the Rosh, you have to learn the Mordechai, you have to learn the Rif, you have to learn the Beis Yosef. It's all about learning the halacha, focusing on the halacha, focusing on the word, on the will of Hashem, and understanding it very well. If a person has a little more time, he says, after learning all the halachas that are relevant in your personal life, then you have to learn the tractate of, the order of kachim, you have to learn the order of agriculture, of purity, you have to cover all 613 mitzvot. He says, once in your life, if you have time and you have the ability, once in your life you should try to go through the whole Talmud. And not only the Babylonian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, and everything that the rabbis wrote. But the primary focus has to be the halachah. And that's what Rav Ashi is coming to teach us. He's making a siyum on the Torah Shabbat Peh. He's explaining to us what is the essence of Torah. The essence of Torah Shabbat Peh is to reveal godliness. How do you reveal godliness? By studying the halacha, the Mishnah, the Brayso, and the Gemara, especially by shoyna, by learning it, and learning it very well. And therefore, that's going to draw down this revelation of godliness that the soul will experience after 120. And now we can understand all the questions. Now it makes sense why he finishes with this, and why he says 2 halachas. You have to study every day, and you have to study 2 halachas. Because he's referring to the mitzvah of studying Torah. The mitzvah of studying Torah is you have to study in the morning and you have to study in the evening. This is how you fulfill the mitzvah of studying. You must study halach in the morning. You must study halach in the evening. And Alter Rebbe writes in the letter, the holy letters, letter number 23, that every shul between Mincha and Ma'ariv, they must learn, in addition to Ayin Yaakov, they have to learn the halachas. And Shabbos in the afternoon, they have to learn the laws of Shabbos. Every day you have to learn halachas. And the whole Talmud is also has to be focused around the halach. But the question remains, why do we have an obligation to study Torah day and night? Why isn't it enough to study every day? Why does it have to be separately? You have to study Torah in day, and you have to study Torah at night. So, as Mendel mentioned, you have the 40 generations, but you have the first 1,000 years of prophecy, till the rabbis of the Great Assembly. Then the era of prophecy came to an end. The first 1,000 years of Jewish history was the era of prophecy. There were 1,200,000 prophets. Then you had approximately 1,000 years of the development of the Mishnah, of the oral Torah. So there's a fascinating Talmud, the Gemara says, in Yuma, Samach Tes, the Gemara says that the rabbis of the Great Assembly decided to kill the evil inclination for idolatry. because of the evil inclination of idolatry led to the destruction of the temple. And it was such a powerful inclination. As the Talmud in Sanhedrin, Kuf Beis, tells us this story with Rav Ashi, the author of the Talmud, who chose this to conclude the whole entire Talmud with this Tanya of Eliyahu. So the Talmud tells us a story that happened with him. He was studying with his students. He was studying in the tractate Sanhedrin, and he came to the Mishnah that says that every Jew has a share in the world to come, with the exception of 3 Jewish kings. They were so evil: Yerovam ben Nevat, Achav, and Menashe. They will not be resurrected. They will not have a share in the world to come. So he told the students, we're going to stop here, and tomorrow we're going to continue, and I'll teach you about my colleagues. They were also great Torah scholars. That night he had a dream. Menashe comes to him in the dream, and he says, you call me your colleague? Let me ask you a simple question. And he asked him a simple halacha, which Rav Ashi couldn't answer. And he taught him the halacha. Rav Ashi was so impressed. He says, I don't understand. You're such a great Torah scholar. How could you worship idols? So Menashe answers. He says, trust me, if you were alive in my day and age, you would lift up the hem of your clothes and you would run so fast to worship idols, you wouldn't even know what hit you. What was this urge to worship idols? Why this tremendous urge to worship idols? And the answer is, and then the Talmud says, the rabbis didn't stop there. They were successful. They fasted for 3 days, and they killed the inclination of idolatry. Then they said, let's kill the evil inclination of immorality, sexual immorality. They did it. They succeeded. But 3 days later, you couldn't find any eggs in the market. So they said, okay, this is not going to work. They took it back. But one thing they did achieve. They poked that evil inclination in the eye, that no one has lust. No one lusts for incest. 99% of people don't lust for incest. So, what's the Talmud telling us? Why the urge for idolatry? Because man is unique. There's no creature in the universe like man. We are the only creatures in the universe who are self-conscious. We have minds. We're self-aware. And that creates a tremendous existential angst. A restlessness. It bothers us. It doesn't feel right. And therefore, we have this urge to obliterate our ego, to obliterate ourselves. So there was this tremendous urge to worship idols, to completely submit yourself and bow down and worship the idol. And when the rabbis killed the evil inclination of idolatry, that's what brought the era of prophecy to an end. Because prophecy was the antidote. Prophecy was the exact opposite, the parallel to idolatry. Prophecy is a state when a Jew went into a state of egolessness. Complete egolessness before Hashem. They went into a trance, they were completely egoless. But it was a holy egolessness. Versus idolatry, which was just obliterating your ego. So when the rabbis succeeded in destroying idolatry, that was the end of the era of prophecy. Then the rabbis went a step further. Man is the only one who has insatiable sexual appetite. Animals bond once a year, twice a year, and they're very happy. Only man is ready to burn the house down. We have such insatiable appetite that nothing can satisfy it, and people self-destruct, and people destroy their families and themselves and their communities. And where does this come from? It comes from the same place. Because we suffer from this existential angst, so we're trying to obliterate our ego. When you release and you let go and you feel that pure pleasure, you're trying to get to a place that's beyond yourself. So the rabbis gave us the antidote. What's the antidote to this problem? It says when Hashem created the world was shaking. The world is inherently unstable. Until He gave the Torah. Because the Torah, studying Torah, this is the antidote. Because when you study Torah, you are studying, you're touching the divine, your mind is filled and engaged with the will of Hashem, but you're able to receive it, you're able to absorb it without being destroyed. It's like a paradox. You have self-awareness, you have self-consciousness. That's the whole foundation of studying Torah, the oral Torah. You're studying Torah, you're learning Torah, and you're learning it in depth. You're fully engaging in your mind. But instead of being self-conscious in the egotistical way, your entire self-consciousness is focused on the will of Hashem, the halacha. And that's why there's an obligation to study it during the day and at night. Instead of everyone is running around clubbing at night and trying to reach a level of mindlessness and partying and obliterating themselves, what's a Jew busy with? What's a Jew engaged with every day and every morning and every night of his life? Studying the will of Hashem. Using your self-consciousness to touch the divine, to become one with Hashem. And that's why this is the ending of Tractate. This is the connection to Nida. The Talmud says in Erevin, Daf Kuf, that the blood of a Nida, this is one of the 10 curses that came as a result of the sin, of the original sin of Adam and Chava. Because when Adam and Chava sinned, suddenly they became egotistical, they became self-aware. And therefore the need and the urge of this insatiable sexual appetite, which is represented in the impurity of a Nida. This is the antidote. This is what's going to lead you to Olam Haba. And that's connected to the beginning of Shas. The beginning, what's the first Mishnah in Shas? The first Mishnah is about Shema. What do we say in the Shema? The first parsha, first we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Hashem is one. And the question is, why do you say Hashem Echad? You should better say Hashem is Yachid. Hashem is exclusive. There's no one besides Hashem. Echad means it could be a second. And then you continue love Hashem with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. And then you say, V'shinantam livanecha v'dibarta bam. You should study Torah v'dibarta bam b'shikcha v'shachva day and night. Because what happens when you say the Shema, you close your eyes and you concentrate and you say the Shema and you experience the love for Hashem with all your heart and all your soul and every fiber of your being. You experience a state of egolessness. As the Talmud says in Brachas, the early Hasidim would daven for 9 hours. As the Torah says, they reached a level of prophecy, almost like a level of prophecy, a complete level of unity with Hashem. But what happens when you finish davening? You open your eyes and you go back into the world. And suddenly you're back into the world of self-awareness, of ego consciousness. What happens then? So the Torah immediately tells you, what's the answer? Study Torah, fill your mind, fill your life with Torah. And that's how you stabilize the world. That's how you achieve Hashem Echad. Hashem Echad means you don't obliterate the world. Yachid means there's no one besides Hashem. Echad means there's Echad, there's Aleph is Hashem, but then there's Ches, the 7 heavens, the earth, the 4 corners of the earth, the Daled. The purpose of Hashem was not to obliterate the world. The whole purpose of Hashem, the whole desire of mitzvahs was, He wanted that there should be a world. And this world should be permeated, touching the divine, should be a world where godliness is revealed. And that's why He says, Halichas Olam Loi. When the Shalah says, whenever he says, Al Tikre, don't read it this way, it doesn't mean to negate the simple reading. He's trying to say the only way to achieve the simple reading is by halichas, means halachas. Olam Loi means that this world belongs to Hashem. You're revealing Hashem in this world. So the Tanya Devei says, how do you fulfill that? How can you reveal Hashem in this world without obliterating this world, without destroying the world? It's only halachas. And that's why it's called halachas. Halachas means you take the world to a different place. Instead of the world being destabilized, you take the world into a different place, into a place of godliness. And that also explains why the Talmud says, don't say goodbye to your friend only by saying a halach. The Rebbe asked the question, why didn't the Talmud say it in a positive way? When you say goodbye, say a halach. Because the Talmud is trying to tell us, you don't want to say goodbye, you don't want to leave, you don't want to part. Yes, physically you're leaving each other. But how do you achieve that you shouldn't part from each other? Through the halacha. Because what separates people? Ego. But if they're learning the halacha together, their whole ego consciousness, their whole mind is engaged in the knowledge of Hashem and the will of Hashem and understanding the will of Hashem, there's no ego, then there's no parting. then you accomplish al yipater. You're accomplishing that there's no separation and there's no parting, even though physically you're parting, but really there's no parting. And now we understand why he finishes with Eliyahu. Because Eliyahu is not only the Siyum of Torah Shebal Peh. Eliyahu is the one who's going to make a Siyum on the Golus. Eliyahu is the one who's going to conclude the whole entire Golus. He's going to blow the shofar. He's going to announce the coming of Mashiach. How does the Rambam describe Mashiach? He quotes Isaiah the prophet. He says, the world will be filled. Also a bunch of mems. The world will be flooded with the knowledge and awareness of Hashem. In other words, like the ocean covers the ocean bed. If you look underneath the ocean, we can't see underneath the ocean, but underneath the ocean it's teeming with life. Whatever you have on the dry land, you have underneath the ocean. The ocean has mountains and valleys and hills, but you look at the water, you don't see anything. All I see is water. So the ocean bed covers the ocean bed. So that's the characterization of Mashiach. There'll be knowledge, there'll be awareness, there'll be self-awareness, there'll be ego knowledge, but the whole knowledge and awareness will be permeated with the knowledge of Hashem. So when the Jew finishes learning all 613 mitzvah, then we merit that the world will become now flooded with the knowledge and awareness of Hashem. So we ask Hashem that he should make, we are making a siyum, but Hashem should make the ultimate siyum, should make a conclusion to the exile, and we should see how the world is halichis olam loy, the whole world is, take the world to a different place, the world will become a Torah world, and then we'll continue this beautiful Malava Malka on the upper east side of Yerushalayim. I'll just make the hadr.
Hashems is Tanya, the Siyum Hashas, and the Hashems is for the Siyum, and the Hashems is kind of the Hashems of our schools, and the Hashems some of the family members of the Hashems and the the sky and be beside the country so this mother of this Erich ja mit mir bis mal schon haben dann Islamit und ich wollte zusammen über Shalom. Gado bis Gado später ab. Amen.